Hi guys, welcome back to the Healthy Middle Ground podcast with me, Jen Curtis. Okay, so this week I want to talk to you about how to get results with strength training, because a lot of women do a lot of the right things, but the devil's in the details when it comes to strength training. And there are certain things that you really have to hone in on and focus on. So a couple of mistakes that women make is, first of all, doing very lightweight, say 2-3 kilos, and doing lots and lots and lots of reps with those weights, like a lot of arms, like lateral raises, bicep curls. Sometimes they're doing things like squats and things like that, but they're never using heavier weights. They're always using those really, really, really light weights and just doing lots and lots and lots of reps on them, often stringing exercises together. And it ends up being more like a cardio workout, right? So HIIT, for example, often has a lot of the same exercises that strength training has, like doing squats, doing rows, doing overhead presses, doing all of those sorts of things. But they're two very different protocols. So with a HIIT workout, what you do is you use relatively light weights and you string them together quickly, and that gets your heart rate up. And there is some resistance, obviously, when it comes to with the exercises that you're doing. If you're doing like 12 kilo kettlebell swings and like 5 kilo squats, there obviously is some resistance and there's some benefit to that, but it's still not strength training. And stuff like, a lot of women do Peloton strength, for example, and it's not really strength training. It's waving very light weights around and it's based around getting your heart rate up. So it's still really a cardio workout, and there just isn't really the same muscle building potential as with strength training. So I'm going to go through with you in this podcast exactly what things you need to do in order to make strength training actually effective, to actually build muscle, to actually look more toned and defined. But I will start by saying that there is no such thing as toning if you haven't got the memo yet. You can't tone a muscle. So all of that Jane Fonda, light weights, high reps, body pump style stuff that we still see a lot of today, it's not strength training, and it's not going to tone the muscles. You can either make a muscle bigger, or it can get smaller through atrophy when it's not used, or it can stay the same. You cannot tone a muscle. There's no benefit to using light weights, high reps. And most of the time, when we want to look more toned and more defined, what we need to also do is lose body fat so that we can reveal the muscles underneath. And often it's a combination of the two. Most people want to build some muscle so that they actually have some to underneath the fat. And they also want to lose some body fat to reveal those muscles. This episode is going to be, I'm really aiming this at a beginner level. Like if you're kind of intrigued by strength training, but you don't know how to do it, or if you're kind of like getting into strength training, but you don't exactly understand all of the parameters. But also if you're more of an intermediate strength trainee, you've lifted some relatively heavy weights, maybe you're moving on to barbells, you go into a gym, you're doing that kind of stuff. And you want to kind of understand how it all works. I've worked with lots and lots of intermediate trainees that have quite good technique and they're moving on to relatively heavy weights, but they don't know how to progress from there. So if that's you, you're going to benefit a lot from this podcast as well. Okay, so the first thing that you have to establish is the frequency. How often are you going to strength train? And this is an important point that people miss out completely. Are you able to work out 3 times a week regularly, like consistently? If so, great. What I find, especially working with the population that I work with, which is mums, often they don't have time for more than 1 or 2 workouts a week. And a lot of them feel like, oh, unless I'm working out every day or doing several workouts a week, it's not going to do anything. And that is categorically false. You can actually get fantastic results doing just 1 strength session a week. So I always encourage my clients if they don't have time for more, to like just trust the process, trust me, and do just the one training session a week, because they'll get incredible results from that. And I think a lot of the fitness industry sells you that you need to go to the gym 5 days a week or something like that. And it makes us feel like unless we're going every day, we're not going to get results. But it's just simply not true. You can get fantastic results with once a week, and even better results from twice a week. And I always encourage everyone to do twice a week if they can, because it is better than once a week and you'll get much faster results. I try to discourage a lot of my clients from doing 3 sessions a week, especially in the beginning. Get consistent with 2 sessions a week, and you can always add more later. But especially if you're just starting out, more is not better, okay? Better is better. Doing the right things and pulling the right levers within your workout, that is going to get you in just 1 or 2 workouts a week, is going to get you way better results than doing the wrong things 5 times a week, okay? You'll just be spinning your wheels, you'll be getting tired, you won't be able to actually lift heavy, you won't be recovering properly, especially if you're going from 0 to 5 right off the bat. And also, it's a consistency thing. If you go to the gym 5 times in the first week, which is what a lot of people do, they get overexcited, go 5 times in January, whatever, and then they don't go again after that, right? Those 5 exercise sessions are going to make no difference to your body whatsoever. Whereas if you go twice a week for a year, or once a week for a year, that's 50 training sessions, and you can get way stronger when you're doing that. A big part of this is consistency. So if you can consistently go once or twice a week, that is better than inconsistently going 4 or 5 times a week. And you will only get results if you do it consistently. You just simply won't get results from going every once in a while. The other reason why it's important to, if you can realistically only do it once or twice a week, is then you can make better decisions about exercise selection, because you've got to get the most important exercises in first, the ones that are going to give you the biggest bang for your buck. So if somebody's only doing 1 session a week, like with my clients, if they're only doing 1 session a week, then I will put all of the most important exercises in that 1 session to make sure that they hit every body part and are doing the things that are going to give them the biggest bang for their buck. Whereas if they can train twice a week for an hour, then we've got a little bit more room, and I'll spread out the most important exercises, because they'll also be the hardest ones, over the 2 training sessions. And then there'll be a little bit more accessory work that we can fit in because we've got more time to work out. But one of the mistakes I see people make is they'll say to me, no, Jen, I want 3 sessions a week. So I'll write them a 3 session a week program, and then they only go once or twice a week. Well, that's not going to work, because you have to spread when you write a good program, you have to spread the exercises over the number of sessions that the person is doing. So if I've spread all the important exercises over 3 sessions and you only go once a week, you're not doing all the most important ones. Whereas if you're honest about, okay, I can only realistically go once a week at the moment, then you can hit all of the most important exercises every single week and actually make progress instead of doing a bit more faff. You've got to remember law of diminishing returns here as well. If you go from nothing to working out once a week, that's going to have insane return on investment. If you go twice a week, that's going to have a bit more, like 1.5 times return on investment, but not as much return on investment as the first session that you did. If you go 3 times a week, that return on investment is even less for the extra time that you're going. And then when you get to 4 or 5 times a week, it's hardly making any difference over 3 times a week. So it's important to work smarter, not harder, because you likely aren't going to get better results from just doing more. And before we move on to the next thing, I just want to mention rest days. So if you're doing twice a week, right, you don't want to do back-to-back sessions. So if you train Monday, you don't want to train Tuesday, because you're training full body. So you're going to be sore Tuesday. You need to spread the sessions out over the week. And it's also ideal if you don't do Monday, then rest Tuesday, then work out Wednesday, because then you've only got 1 rest day, and then you've got 5 rest days from Wednesday to Monday again. Okay, so we want to spread it across the week more evenly if we can. Say Monday, and then Tuesday, Wednesday rest. Thursday is your second strength session, and then Friday, Saturday, Sunday rest. and then Monday you're back to training again. But the beauty of 2 sessions a week is that it's very, very flexible. So if you can't make it one day, you can just move it to the next day and it doesn't really matter. Okay, let's move on to like what muscle groups you should do. So like, should you do upper body workout or a booty workout or a leg workout? If you are working out less than 3 times a week, you want to do full body, right? You do not want to be, 99% of people do not want to be doing upper body, lower body, like, or like arms or whatever, like those kind of like gym splits. That's only gonna work if you're doing like 5 sessions a week, right? Because you're gonna do chest one day, then you're gonna do like legs the next day, then you're gonna do arms the next day, right? That is not going to work for most people. It does work for very high level bodybuilders, but it's not for you. Even if your favorite influencer does that, it is not for you. We want to work every single muscle group twice a week, ideally. So if we're working out twice a week, we have to do full body, right? We have to do the whole body and not do gym splits. And if you're working out once a week, you definitely have to do full body. If you're working out 3 times a week, that's when I would start to split things up. So I would do upper body, lower body, then full body. Okay, so you're still training each muscle group twice a week. But again, I've had clients who are like, no, I want 3 times a week. I write them upper body, lower body, full body. And then what ends up happening, they end up going twice a week and they just do upper body, then lower body. And they're not hitting each muscle group twice. So it would have been better for them to have a 2 times a week program that they can actually do, that both of those times a week are full body and they're actually hitting all muscle groups twice a week. Okay, number 3 is exercise selection. What exercises should you be doing? And there are absolutely right and wrong exercises to be doing for like 99% of people. The biggest mistake women make is they go and do isolation exercises. That means single joint exercises. So if you think of like a bicep curl, you're only bending your elbow. You're only using the biceps. There's a couple of other muscles in there, but like you're just using a very small muscle or body part. This is the wrong way to go about it. Or like lateral raises, or maybe doing some bum exercises, or doing a bit of abs. And the absolute worst one is doing like pec flies, you know, and you see like people on these big machines and like kind of like doing a big bear hug with 2 massive cables. This is the most pointless exercise in the world for women to do. Like, I mean, apart from anything else, we don't want bigger pecs. That's not the body part to focus on if you're a woman. But just breaking things down to single joint exercises that only move one joint, this is not what you want to do. What you want to do instead is big compound exercises. What are compound exercises? Compound exercises are multi-joint exercises. So exercises that use a few joints. There's not only so many you can use. So something like a squat, for example, you're using your hips, you're using your knees, you're using your ankle joint. So there's 3 big joints in there. And then you're also using your spine, especially if you've got weight on it. A row would be a multi-joint exercise because you're using your elbow and your shoulder, whereas a bicep curl, you're only using your bicep or the elbow. If you're doing an overhead press, if you're holding a dumbbell and pressing upwards, also called a shoulder press, again, you're using your shoulder and your elbow joint, and there are several muscles being used, as opposed to doing a lateral raise where you're just using your deltoid and just moving your shoulder joint. And I'm going to take you through my super simple structure of a workout. Something I forgot to say in the intro, though, is that I have a really great strength training email course that I'm going to link in the description below. If you need it, send me a message and I'll send it to you, where I go through all of these things over a number of days. And there's actually a written program for you. There's 3 different programs. There's one for beginners with no weights, one for beginners with dumbbells, and one for intermediate trainees in a gym. And I follow all these principles. So that would be a great next step for you, is to do that email course. So then you can actually practice what I'm teaching here and see how it's actually laid out in a training program. but also over a number of days, learn how to implement these things properly and go over these concepts I'm talking about now. Okay, so I'm going to give you my super simple structure for a training plan. Basically, there are 3 types of compound or multi-joint exercises that you need to do. Oh, and the other thing is you need to focus on movements, not muscles, okay? So instead of focusing on, I'm going to do my glutes, and just focusing on one muscle, you want to train movement. So you want to do a squat, which is going to train your glutes, but it's also going to train your thighs, like front and back, quads and hamstrings. It's going to train your calves. It's going to train your back to a certain degree. And again, going back to the example of a row, you want to be thinking about doing a row rather than just a bicep curl, okay? So we're doing an actual movement, a row, rather than just training a single muscle. So movements, not muscles. Anyway, these compound exercises can be broken down into 3 categories, okay? Legs, push, and pull. Okay, so you've got some leg exercises that are multi-joint, push exercises that are multi-joint, and pull exercises that are multi-joint. Then each of those groups is split into 2 as well. So when it comes to legs, you have what are called quad dominant and hip dominant exercises. So a squat, for example, is a quad dominant exercise. Okay, so it works all of the muscle groups of all of the muscles of the lower body, but it has an emphasis on quads, which is the front of your thigh, the quadricep muscles. Whereas a deadlift, like a Romanian deadlift in particular, again, it works all of the muscles in your legs, but it has more of an emphasis on the hips. It's a hip hinge exercise, and it's going to have more of an emphasis on the posterior chain. So all of your back, your bum, and your hamstrings over your quads. So legs is split into 2, quad dominant and leg dominant. Also, on my YouTube channel, there are all of these exercises in 1 to 2 minute tutorials. So I'm going to link an example of the squat below. And if you want to know how to do these exercises, you can browse through that library or search Jen Curtis and then the name of the exercise and it should pop up. Okay, so that was legs. And then there's push. Push, you can push in basically 2 planes, okay? So you can push in front of you, which is like a push-up or like a bench press or a chest press, okay? So if I'm standing, I'm pushing directly out in front of me. If I'm in a plank position, I'm pushing myself off the floor, okay? That's called a horizontal push. And then there's a vertical push, right? So when I'm pushing overhead. And that is like a shoulder exercise. So the horizontal push is a chest emphasis. You're also working your triceps. And then the overhead press, the vertical press, is a shoulder emphasis. Then when it comes to pulling exercises, it's the same, right? A vertical and a horizontal pull. So a horizontal pull is a rowing motion, and it's going to have a lot of emphasis on the upper back, but also biceps. And a vertical pull is like a chin up, right? Where you're pulling yourself up to the bar and you're pulling down. So you could also do a lat pull down, right? That machine that you sit on at the gym where you hold a bar over your head and then you pull down to your chest. Okay, that's a vertical pulling motion. So those are 6 different exercises, right? Or 6 different movement patterns. There's a quad dominant leg exercise, a hip dominant leg exercise, or a hip hinge. There is a vertical push and a horizontal push, and a vertical pull and a horizontal pull. What you want to do is those 6, you only need 1 of each, but spread out across the week. Okay, so we're only at 3 exercises per training program if you're doing twice a week. And when you if you do end up doing more volume and training more, you might have more than 1 of those exercises across the week, right? So you might have a squat and something else, okay? But in the beginning, that would just be the bare minimum. Oh, another concept that I forgot to say in the intro is this is kind of the way I operate is a minimum effective dose, right? I work with really busy mums, and they have to get their training done and get on with their life. So this isn't like the optimal program. This isn't like doing as much as humanly possible. This is doing exactly what you need to do to get results and then nothing more. That's called the minimum effective dose. I currently don't train minimum effective dose. I do a bit more than that. I train 4 times a week, but I've had lots and lots of periods over the past few years where I've trained a bare minimum, twice a week, just doing the major lifts, and that's it. And so if you want to just do the most important things, you could just do those 6 exercises across the week. And honestly, you're going to make great progress if you follow the rest of my tips. And well, they're not really tips, they're sort of like really important factors and training variables that bring about results. But continuing on with exercise selection just for a moment, once you've got those 6 exercises in, that's when you can then add more accessory or isolation exercises in. So this is when we would put an emphasis on a particular body part that we want to either build more muscle on or improve the appearance of. So for example, you might do core exercises and glute exercises. Again, you don't need a shit ton, right? You don't need to do an hour of core exercises or Pilates or whatever. You only really need 1 or 2 exercises, core exercises across the week. I'll do a separate podcast on core exercises because it's never ending. And you might do a glute focused exercise like a hip thrust or a hip abduction machine at the gym. Again, there's lots of different glute exercises, but you might just have like 1 or 2 in your program. And then if you still have time and if you want to, because that's quite a short training program, right? You can get all of that done in like 20 minutes. So if you're wanting to train for longer, this is where you can then put in more accessory exercises. I would also add in that you probably want to have, even in a minimal program, you probably want to have a single leg exercise. And I would choose something like a split squat or a lunge because it's going to give you the biggest bang for your buck in terms of like the strength gains, and it's also going to give you hip stability and stuff like that. So you want to have like a 2-legged exercise like a squat, but you also want to have a split squat. So continuing with isolation exercises, a lot of mums need to have something like a single leg deadlift, which isn't really there for building lots of strength. It's more for just balance and hip stability because we tend to lose both of those things through pregnancies, postpartum, and as we get older. That's when you would then add at the end of your training session a sprinkling of things like bicep curls, tricep extensions, deltoids, like your shoulders, like a lateral raise. But the thing to remember here is that you want to do muscles. This is when doing these isolation exercises at the end, right? All the most important big movements you want to do early on in the program, and you might do the isolation exercises at the end, but again, it's optional, right? This is, if you're doing minimum effective dose, you would just do the most important big compound exercises. Sorry about my dog going mental in the background. But if you're going to do isolation exercises, it's only if you have the time for it. Number 2, it only needs to be like a sprinkling of them. You don't need to do a shit ton. You don't need to do a bunch of different bicep exercises. And you also want to choose muscles that you want to be bigger, okay? So if, like for women, it's a good idea. The most obvious one is glutes, right? It's a good idea to do some glute exercises. There's no doubt about that. But you might also want to like build a bit of shoulders because it helps create a V from your shoulders down to your waist. And upper back is something that women neglect a lot. Because again, if you do upper back exercises, it creates a bigger upper back. Obviously, you don't want to look like a man, you don't want to look like a beast, but a wider upper back or a more muscular upper back, it's not only going to help with posture, but it also creates that nice V shape. And this is where we can the isolation exercises are more about physique and aesthetics. The worst exercise that I see so many women doing this at the gym. Again, I said it in the intro, but it's like those pec flies where they've got a big cable machine on one side and a big cable machine on the other, and they're standing in the middle of the gym and they're like pulling their arms together. Like the last muscle that women need to build is their pec muscles, which is your chest muscles, right underneath your boobs. I think a lot of women still think that it's going to help make their boobs perkier. But the reason why men do this is because they look aesthetically pleasing when they have big chest muscles. Women do not need to be doing these kind of isolation exercises. You want to focus on the bum, you want to focus on the shoulders, you want to maybe do some work on like your arm muscles if you like to see a bit more definition, and maybe leg muscle, but the last thing you want to do is like pec muscles. There's no reason to do that. And then just finally, there might be other isolation exercises or like more focusing on other parts of fitness. So I mentioned balance, but you might do something like a box jump for like explosive power, or like a kettlebell swing. But this is really starting to get into like more advanced training. And the average person, especially if you're just trying to get started on your own, you don't need to worry about this stuff. Okay, so number 4, I kind of touched on this already, but I just want to emphasize it, is the order of the exercises. You have to go from the hardest to the easiest. So you have to start your workout with the hard exercises. So if you're doing a squat, for example, big muscle group, it's very tiring to do. You want to do that at the beginning of your workout when you're fresh. If you're trying to get your first pull-up, you want to work on that at the beginning of your workout while it's fresh. So within the first few exercises, you want to be doing those big important exercises, and then you go from hardest to easiest, and you go from compound, like the multi-joint exercises, to single joint exercises or accessory exercises. And you go from complex exercises to simple exercises. Okay, so it's much more complicated. A squat is much, much more complicated than a bicep curl. And doing a chin up is more complicated than a bicep curl. Anyone can do a bicep curl. It's not hard to teach someone to do that. But learning the correct technique of a squat is much more difficult. And of course, that means that you can't do everything, right? So what I tend to do with my trainees is right at the beginning of their training plan, what our goals are for this training phase, okay, which is a 6-week block. And we only have 1 or 2 goals at any one time, like to get your first push up, to get your first pull up, to increase the weight on the squat, because if you try to catch 2 rabbits, you'll typically catch none. So, and you can't sail in 2 boats. So you have to like pick what you're aiming for. And if you really want to get your first pull up, that needs to be really prioritized. And that means that not everything can be prioritized, right? Like you've only got 1 or 2 exercises that you can prioritize first, because then by definition, they're coming later in the workout and they're not going to be the priority. Okay, number 5 is, I think this is a really important one that gets overlooked, but you should be working in supersets. What does that mean? That means that you want to be working in pairs of exercises. So a superset is a pair of exercises that are non-competing body parts. So for example, you might do a squat and a row, or a squat and an ab exercise, or a squat and a push-up, okay? That's a leg exercise and a row exercise, a leg exercise and a core exercise, a leg exercise and a chest exercise. You want them to be completely non-competing. So you might also do, the simplest way of doing it is just legs and upper body, but also you could do a push and a pull as a superset. So like you do a pull up or a lat pull down, that's your vertical pulling exercise, and a push exercise like, I don't know, a push up or something. Or even a dumbbell shoulder press, right? They're completely opposite muscle groups. So what you wouldn't do is you wouldn't do like a pull up and a bicep curl, because they both use the same, like the pull up uses the bicep. So you're then going to be tiring your bicep out, and then you're going to go back to the chin up, and you're just wearing your bicep out, so you're going to be less strong in the chin up. Okay, so they have to be non-competing. You could do a bench press and a bicep curl, okay, because you don't use a bicep in the bench press. So doing things in supersets, it is technically optional. What you can do instead is what's called straight sets. So you do a set of your squats, then you rest, then you do a set of squats, then you rest, then you do another set of squats, then you rest, and then you go on to your second exercise. So that's called straight sets. But supersets would be you do a set of the squats, and then you do a set of rows, and then with rest in between, then you rest, then you do a second set of squats, then you rest, then you do a second set of rows, and then you go back to your third set and complete both exercises. And then you move on to a different superset. So this is technically optional. You can just do straight sets, but I recommend supersets because it's a much more efficient use of your gym time. You're going to get much more done in a shorter period of time. Now, you need to be careful not to turn it into a HIIT workout. You're not going back and forth between the exercises without any rest. I'll come on to that in a moment. You still need to rest in between sets, but the thing is that you can rest less and get more done. So if I was going to just do straight sets of squats, I'd probably need like 3 minutes rest in between each set of squats to be able to do my best in the next exercise. Whereas if I superset squats and rows, I can do squats and then rest for a minute and then do a set of rows, then rest for a minute, then do a set of squats, then rest for a minute. And my legs are resting for 3 minutes, but I'm doing another exercise in between. Obviously, this is more strenuous as well. So your heart rate is kept up more. We don't want to turn it into a HIIT workout, but your heart rate is elevated more throughout the workout and doesn't get as much rest. This is quite difficult for beginners to do at times. If you're really unfit, and your cardiovascular fitness is really low, then you'll need bigger rests because you'll be out of breath from the exercises. But the upside of it is that it will improve your cardiovascular fitness as well as all the other benefits of strength training. So I think it's just one way that, I've worked with mums for 10 years now, and you can get both cardiovascular improvements and all the benefits of strength training if you do things in supersets. And for a mum who only has 1 or 2 hours a week or to train, she can get so much bang for her buck. Also, anyone else who's busy, you can have good cardiovascular fitness, and you can build muscle, build bone density, protect your joints, all of that good stuff that comes from strength training. So again, minimum effective dose. You're going to get so much bang for your buck from just 1 session a week or 2 sessions a week, even better. And you're not going to have to do cardio on the side because you are going to get some cardiovascular gains from doing this. And this is enormous. If it's just about keeping fit and healthy through, these really busy child rearing years, then you can get so much out of 2 sessions a week. Again, even just 1. But cardio alone wouldn't get you the muscle benefits, and strength training with just straight sets wouldn't get you the same cardiovascular benefits. Now, obviously, if you're super duper advanced and if you're a power lifter and you're trying to lift 1.5 times your body weight, you can't train like this, right? You need to be resting fully in between sets. But this podcast episode isn't for that population. Most people don't want to lift super duper heavy weights, myself included. I want to just be fit and healthy and look good. And that's pretty much my goals. And also, if you can do some cardiovascular fitness on top of that, if you can go running once or twice a week as well, amazing. But a lot of us don't have time for that. And so you're still going to you're not going to get as good benefits, cardiovascular benefits from doing strength training in supersets as you would from, doing, running 10K 3 times a week. You're obviously going to get more cardiovascular benefits from the latter. But again, this is a way that you can get a bit of everything and enough to be healthy and take you over that threshold of being healthy and lean and feeling good in minimal time. A thing about logistics, if you're working in a gym, you obviously have to make sure that you're only using one piece of equipment, one big piece of equipment at a time. So I would often give say squats to if they're using a squat rack and a barbell. So I would give that to one of my trainees with say a core exercise next to it, or a row that they could do next to it, or with a pull-up that they could do on the pull-up machine, or a push-up, which is a body weight exercise on the floor, or a dumbbell shoulder press that they can do next to the squat rack in between sets. But what you can't do is you can't do a squat on a squat rack and also the bench press thing on the other side of the room. You can't hog 2 big pieces of equipment. The way I like right programs is taking the logistics of the gym into consideration. So a squat would go with, say, like a dumbbell shoulder press, like I said before. And then when they move on to the bench press, they can do a row on the bench in between sets of the bench press, which is a chest exercise. Okay. So you always have to take gym logistics into account. But if you're working out at home, if you've got like adjustable weights, or if you've got a bit of equipment in your house, you can obviously do this. Like you could have a bench press with a squat, like that's not a problem. Number 6, let's talk about rest. How much you need to rest in between the sets. So when I did my initial qualification to be a personal trainer like 10 years ago, I remember learning protocols like if you're doing maximal strength training, you need to rest for 3 to 5 minutes in between sets. If you're doing hypertrophy training, you need to wait for 30 seconds or 90 seconds in between sets. And it was very, very rigid. But I've since learned that it doesn't need to be as rigid as that. You don't need to be timing your rests. But what you do need to do is, like, I just want to reconceptualize rest for a moment, because the rest time is basically time that allows your muscles to recover, and so that you can give it a maximal effort in the next set. And basically, rather than thinking of rest being like optimal in like 90 seconds or 30 seconds or whatever, actually the best amount of rest is the more rest, the better. So like if you can rest 15 minutes in between each set, then that's really amazing, because your muscles can fully recover over those 15 minutes. And this is what like a lot of people who are professional athletes will do, because they've got all day to train, right? And I used to do it when I was working in a gym, is I'd go and do a set of pull-ups, and then like after the next class, which was an hour later, I would go and do another set of pull-ups. So I was like resting an hour in between sets. And this is extremely effective, but completely impossible and completely impractical for the average person trying to get stronger. So we keep rest times short just from a purely pragmatic position. But it doesn't need to be a specific amount of time. So you just basically want to rest for long enough to feel like you can physically and mentally cope with going as hard as possible in the next set. Okay. And that is going to be affected by a number of different factors. So if the fitter you are, probably the less you're going to need the less rest you're going to need in between sets. So if your cardiovascular fitness is amazing and you already run 3 times a week and whatever, you're going to find it much easier going between, say, squats and rows than somebody who is just completely starting from scratch, really overweight, feeling really, really unfit, because their heart rate is going to go up. They're much more deconditioned, and their heart rate's going to go up much faster and much higher than yours if you're very, very fit. So somebody who's less fit is going to need more rest in between sets to feel like they've caught their breath, to feel like their heart rate's come back down, and then to feel like they can actually go heavy on the next set. So if you've just done a heavy set of squats, and you want to go, if you go straight into your rows after that, you're going to be much weaker and lift much less weight and feel much less strong, much weaker even in the set of rows than if you were to wait for a minute. But also, if you are going into this feeling very, very unfit, maybe you've had a couple of babies and you haven't worked out regularly in a long time, the good news is that as you get fitter, both your muscles get stronger and your cardiovascular fitness gets better. You're going to feel better in between the sets. You're going to recover quicker in between the sets, and you're probably going to need less rest time. Another factor that affects how big the rest time is which exercise it is and how big the muscle group is. So squats, for example, are a massive muscle group, and they're going to jack your heart rate. Single leg squats, split squats, lunges, whatever you want to call them. They also really jack your heart rate, especially if you're doing it high reps with a lot of weight. Whereas if you're doing a bicep curl, that doesn't need much, it doesn't raise your heart rate very much because it's a very small muscle. So as you get towards the end of your exercise, your end of your workout, maybe you're doing you're doing bicep curls and tricep extensions or bicep curls and an ab exercise, you probably don't need to rest between those sets. You just go back and forth because your heart rate isn't really getting up and it's not strenuous enough to really make you tired. Whereas if you're doing squats and pull-ups, you're going to need a fuck ton of rest in between each set because they're both very hard exercises, especially if you're going quite heavy or if you're doing your max set of pull-ups, you're going to need quite a bit of rest. It might be more like 2 minutes, maybe even more in between each set. So in between the squat and the pull-up, not just in between the squats. And then that ends up being like a 5-minute gap and a 5-minute rest between each sets of squats where you're doing the pull-up in between. But then just to add another layer of complication, I hope I'm not losing you here, is that you can also, and that's another reason to, especially I do this especially with beginners, is pair an exercise like a squat, which is much more strenuous, much harder, with a core exercise or something else that's not very hard, because then the core exercise, or sometimes I give mobility exercises, that's basically active recovery. You can go from your squats, sort of have a sip of water, maybe rest sort of 20 seconds before you're getting into your ab exercise, and on the way back, the same sort of thing. And because it's much less strenuous, so you just don't need as much rest to do it. Okay, then now we've got the exercises that we need to do. We've got our supersets. We've maybe written our program, say squats, core exercise, lat pull downs, push-ups, split squat, and bicep curls, right? Let's just say that's our workout. Each one, 6 exercises, each in supersets. Let's talk about specifically what you need to do within each of those exercises to do it right, first of all, and then to get stronger just looking at the one individual exercise. So first, you need to get or establish or figure out what your mobility is. So I always give my trainees a mobility warm-up. I'm going to link a mobility warm-up example that's like 5.5 minutes in the comments or in the description below. So if we take something like a squat, for example, you don't want to just squat with no idea of what your mobility is, okay? So you want to get into a deep squat. And you certainly, I find it really strange how many people like just go into squatting without having even gotten into a deep squat. You see it at the gym all the time. And I see it when I go to CrossFit as well, that the warm up won't include any deep squats. And then we'll just go straight into squatting. And I think that's poor coaching. If you're going to be squatting in this specific workout, you need to be in a deep squat as part of the warm-up. But if you want to squat at all, you need to, first of all, establish what your mobility is in the squat, okay? So you want to get into a deep squat, and some people are going to just get there and it's going to be fine. Some of you are going to have difficulty getting into a deep squat because of mobility issues in the ankle, in the knee, in the hip, whatever. So if you can just sit in a deep squat, and again, I'm going to put a video below, then you can start to do the exercise. But what you want to do is look at your feet position, the distance apart your feet are, that they're probably turning out a little bit unless you're super flexible. And this is what you want your foot position to be when you're doing the squat as an exercise. And you also want your knees, if you look at your knees as well, they'll be tracking over your toes, going outwards, okay? They won't be falling inwards if you're in a deep squat. So if you can do a deep squat, that is what your squat is going to look like when you start doing it as a strength exercise, or when you start doing it and when you start adding weight, okay? It's always going to look exactly the same as that squat. If you can't get into a squat or can't hold yourself in a squat, then you need to work on the mobility first, and obviously work on with the mobility that you have. Same thing for pressing overhead, right? If you can't get your arms completely overhead, you've got no business pressing a weight overhead, because you're not going to have the mobility to get it directly overhead. It's going to go forwards rather than directly up. So one of the exercises that I use the most to warm up is a downward facing dog, right? Because you're getting your arms completely into what's called shoulder flexion, okay? Which is where your hands totally over your head. A lot of mums are really, really tight in the shoulders and the upper back, and they can't get their arms completely overhead. If that's you, then one, you want to work on that mobility, and two, you want to not do overhead pressing exercises until, like, you want to do horizontal pressing exercises, but not vertical ones, until you have improved that mobility. And for some people, it's just going to take a little bit of mobility work to improve. And for other people, you're never going to get to certain ranges of motion, and that's okay. There's other things you can do. Then once you've established mobility in all of your joints, then you want to learn the technique for each given exercise, because there is actually a right way and a wrong way of doing a squat, for example. And there are a lot of trainers who don't even know correct technique. So for example, a squat is going to look, like I said before, just like that deep squat, that Mexican, Indian squat where you're like sitting down, feet flat on the floor, and you're in a deep squat. Again, I'm going to link a video into the description of a proper squat technique. It's one of those things that once you've learned it, like once you know how to do a proper squat and how it looks on you and feels on your body, you never have to learn it again. But so many people come and they go into different exercise classes and they're doing things just willy-nilly. They're doing like a half range of motion squat or with feet parallel and all this bullshit that they've been taught, and they don't think about properly doing the squat properly and it having a proper technique. And I work with a lot of people who have done a lot of training before, but they've never been taught proper technique. So you kind of have to go back to those basics to ensure that you're getting the proper technique of the exercises. Again, my YouTube channel has got loads of exercises. I need to do a bunch more of these tutorials, but they're very short, sharp tutorials that teach you exactly how to do it. I think going over exactly how to do a squat in this podcast, just from describing, it's not going to work, right? You're going to need to see those videos and try it for yourself. Again, YouTube channel, but also my email course is it has hyperlinks to all of the movements and exactly how to do them correctly. So definitely use that. So after we've got mobility technique in each individual exercise, so in a squat, for example, or in an overhead press, then we want to establish proper range of motion. So this is similar to the mobility side of things. You need to figure out the mobility that you have first, and then you want to work through the full range of motion available at your joints, okay? So in a squat, hopefully you've got full squat mobility and you're going to be able to get your bum lower than your knees. So you're going to be able to break parallel. Some of you won't be able to, that's okay. And you're going to be doing kind of a half range of motion squat, and you've got to work because of mobility issues, you're going to have to do other exercises. But most people can do that full range of motion squat. And the reason to do the full range of motion is because, one, it works the joints and the muscles through their full range of motion, right? Not just part of it. So you get strong through the full range of motion rather than your joints just getting strong in like, a half or quarter of their range of motion. You want your knees to go from fully flexed, fully bent to fully extended, right? You don't want to do part of that. The other reason to do full range of motion is because you want to be traveling the same distance every single rep and every single workout. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to accurately measure if you're progressing or not. So an example is with a push-up. A lot of women say they can do push-ups on the floor, and then they proceed to start the push-up, but they're only going through about half range of motion, right? If you imagine being up on a high plank and you're going down towards the floor, but you only get halfway there and you're still like 5 inches off the floor, like that's not a full push-up, okay? You need to be coming all the way down, boobs touching the floor, and then pressing back up, okay? So if you do something like, let's say a squat again, just for simplicity, and you start off with a really light weight and you're going through full range of motion. Then you add a barbell on your back and you do 20 kilos, but you only go through half of that range of motion. You're not traveling the same distance. So you haven't necessarily improved or built strength. And this is what so many people do. As they add weight, they start to move through smaller and smaller ranges of motion rather than going from, like for example, in a push up, all the way down to the floor, boobs touching the floor, to all the way back up, press, like locking their elbows out. Okay, so moving on to how many reps, how many sets. So this is something that people agonize over. When it comes to reps, just to make sure we've got the same, like we're using the same language, reps are how many times you're doing the exercise. So if I do a squat and I do 10 squats, that's 10 reps. Okay. It's short for repetitions. So it's 10 repetitions of the exercise. And then those 10 repetitions would be one set. And then I would do a set of another exercise. And then I would come back to my second set of squats. Okay, so how many reps should you do? Most of you want to stick to a kind of middle range of reps. Okay, so like that's around 8 to 12 reps for most exercises. Okay, it's not the only answer, but for most people, that's a good middle ground. You don't want to be doing 15, 20, 25 reps, okay? Because it's just way too long. You're not going to be going heavy enough. You're going to be using a really light weight. You're not actually going to get stronger. But if we go for like 1 to 5 reps, you're going really, really heavy. And for most people, that is not necessary, especially in the beginning. You don't want to be doing very small sets with very heavy weight. That's more of an intermediate thing, right? Once you get a bit stronger and, if you want to get more into it, you can do lower rep ranges. But you basically want to be sticking to around 8 to 12, 8 to 15 reps for most things, especially in the beginning. This is just a sweet spot for it's not so long that you want to kill yourself. Doing 25 reps of squats is like really shit. But it's not so heavy that you're more at risk of injury. The heavier you go, the more the risk of injury increases. So you don't want to be doing that in the beginning. It's more of a sweet spot where you're going to get really good muscle growth. You're going to get good cardiovascular gains. You're going to increase your strength. So it's best to stick to those mid ranges of 8 to 12, maybe as much as 15 for some exercises. Because you can make really good progress there without risking getting injured. And what I tend to do is I give my trainees a rep range, which I will describe in just a moment. So I might give them 8 to 10 reps of whatever given exercise. Okay, so there's a range rather than a specific number of reps. And then when it comes to sets, how many sets should you do? Should you do 3 or 4 sets? It's really just about just kind of adding more volume, right? Your training volume is the weight in the exercise times reps times sets. Okay, so if you do more sets, you do 4 or 5 sets, you're obviously increasing your training volume and you're increasing the stimulus of the muscles. A good sweet spot is normally 3 sets, right? It's not too much that you get really, really worn out, but it's enough to sort of get a bit of work done and feel the muscles and maybe improve a little bit. But honestly, you could do 2 sets, you could do 1 set, especially in the beginning. If you did 1 set of each exercise every week and focused on progressive overload, which we're going to talk about in a moment, you'd still get stronger, right? So 1 set can still be something that gets you stronger, but I would stick more to 3, at least 2 sets for most things. But then if you you're really short on time this week and you just want to get a quick workout done, you could always just go and do 1 or 2 sets of everything instead of 3. So that's still going to do something, and it's certainly going to maintain your strength levels, maybe even build them a little bit. So I've always tried to encourage my clients to go eat it. If you don't have much time, don't be all or nothing about it. Don't be I'm going to do the hour-long workout and 3 sets of everything, or I'm going to do nothing. Go and do 1 set of everything. That will do something as well. But there isn't really a magic number of sets or a magic number of reps. It's fine to do less sets, especially when you're busy. Okay, how much should you lift? We're getting towards the last few things here. So how much should you be lifting in any given exercise? You want to think of Goldilocks and the 3 bears here, right? You don't want it to be too light and you don't want it to be too heavy. You want it to be just right. And that is going to be very individual, okay? It's going to be very different from person to person. So for example, somebody who's never worked out before in their life and starting now 6 months postpartum, she might be doing like half range of motion squats, like seven reps of it and just 2 sets. Whereas if you are already very, very strong and you're coming back to the gym after a break, the right weight for you might be 30 kilos or 65 pounds in the squat. It's going to depend enormously on your current strength levels and what's heavy for one person. So if you're I've got a lot of clients who are sort of getting into strength training and they're doing like a 5 kilo goblet squat. For them, it's heavy. For them, they've moved on from 0 weight and they've done 1 kilo, 2 kilo, 3 kilo. Now they're doing 5. This is very heavy for them. But for someone else, it's going to be super duper light, okay, and vice versa. So you have to find the right weight for you at your current level of fitness and at your current stage in life. So the big mistake, most women either go way too light or way too heavy, and there's nothing in between. So women who have trained in the past, it's really hard to get them to hold back. They'll go to the gym and they will kill themselves. Men do this as well. They'll always pick more weight rather than less, and then they really hurt themselves. They're super duper sore. You want to find something that's a sweet spot. If you're a true beginner and you've never done anything before, you want to start with no weight or very, very lightweight. So you might be doing rows or shoulder press with like 2 kilos, like 4 or 5 pounds. I have nothing against that. You absolutely have to start there. My argument when I say you shouldn't do light weights is you shouldn't stay there, right? You should be looking to progress from there, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. If you're coming back from a break though, you've done strength training before, again, you're not going to go back to like 0, okay? So when I started training postpartum a year ago after my 3rd, it's not like I went back to 0. Like I had to find, okay, like a 5 kilo squat felt good now rather than like 0. But women who are getting back into training, say postpartum or after a break or after an injury, women who have trained before and want to start training again, they often overdo it and go way too heavy. So you also want to focus on recoverable volume. So you might be able to get into the gym and do like a 30 kilo back squat or a 50 kilo back squat again, but then you're so crippled the next week that you can barely walk and you can't bend your knees or go downstairs. So there are 2 things that you need to pay attention to: the actual how it feels during the lift, so the actual exertion during the lift, how hard it is during the lift, but then you also want to focus on how you feel afterwards, how sore you are your legs getting shaky, right? You need to stop if your legs are getting shaky because you're not going to be able to recover from more. And even though you're able to do like 50 kilos, if you're sore for a week, then you're not able to recover from that volume. So you need to do less. That's for women returning to fitness. But if you're a beginner, you want to use a weight that you can do all of the reps in the set for through full range of motion with proper technique, and get to the top of the rep range. That's what you want. That's the weight that you want to use in the beginning. And in the beginning, it's about figuring out, do I need to do 3 kilos in this exercise or 5 kilos in this exercise or 20 kilos in this exercise? You need to find the sweet spot of something that feels challenging for the rep range that you have, say 8 to 10 reps, but not so hard that your form's breaking down and that you're super sore afterwards. Then the most important thing that I do with my clients that a lot of trainers don't do yet is, again, going back to this rep range I've given them. So let's say I've said a squat, 8 to 10 reps. And then, so they do a body weight squat for 10 reps. If you can reach the top of the rep range, you need to go up in weight. Okay, so then she might grab a 2 kilo dumbbell and do the same movement. If she can still work through all the range of motion, her technique's still perfect, and she gets to the top of the rep range, so 10 reps, that is your sign that you need to go up again. Okay, so every time you get to the top of the rep range, you want to try going up in weight a little bit. And if you take a certain weight and you can't do the rep range, so say 8 to 10 reps, and you can only do 5 reps, it's too heavy and you need to go down in weight. This is like auto regulation, okay? So that you can learn, how to know if you need to go up in weight or go down in weight, if something's too heavy or too light, rather than just having an arbitrary weight, me saying do X weight for 10 reps for this set, and then the next week saying go up by 2.5 kilos, right? You go up by whatever increment, the smallest increment possible, when you feel capable of doing it. Now, the downside of this is that most women are far too conservative, and they'll go, okay, I'll take 2 kilos, I'll do 10 reps, and then another 10 reps, and then another 10 reps. Oh, it feels hard, I'm not going to go up in weight. And then they come to the next training session a week later, and they also do 2 kilos for 10 reps, 2 kilos for 10 reps, 2 kilos for 10 reps. They go, oh, it felt really hard, so I don't go up. No, if you can do 10 reps, you want to go up to 3 kilos in the next set. Obviously, you can stick to the same weight for the whole workout, but then in the next workout, you need to go up in weight. Most women are far too conservative with this. How it feels is important, but over time, you need to realize that it is going to feel hard. It's never going to feel easy, right? You're not going to go up in weight when it feels easy. The only way for 2 kilos to feel easy is to increase the weight over time, and then you get to like 5 kilos, and then 2 kilos feels super light. Okay, if you keep working with 2 kilos, you won't get any strength gains. You'll just stay the same. As a beginner, you're going to go through this very cautiously, but as a general rule, you should definitely be adding at least 1 kilo or 2 pounds to each exercise every single session. You can, if you're coming back and you're more confident with weights, you're going to probably add weight much more quickly than that. But if you're a complete beginner, you can just do that. If you do that through all the exercises, like you're going to be pressing 10 kilos, squatting 10 kilos, like in a very short space of time, and you're going to feel totally different. Then on the other hand, women who are into strength training and who are more intermediate and who come back, what I often find is that they'll put a load of weight on the bar. They'll only be able to do 7 reps instead of the full 10, and then they'll add more weight, and now they can only do 5 reps. That's going too heavy, right? There's a reason why I've given you a certain rep range. You need to work, if you can only do, say, if you put 30 kilos on the bar and you can only do 8 kilos, stick with the same weight until you can do 10 kilos, and then you can go up in weight. So it goes into those 2 groups, either way too conservative with it, or way too willy-nilly adding too much weight with it. There's a sweet spot in between, and you need to know if you're somebody who tends to go too light or too heavy. Okay, number 13, these are the last 2 things. Number 13 is consistency. So unless you're going every single week, you're not going to get results, right? So you're going to have to go if you go once a week or twice a week, but you go every week, right, you're going to get results. But if you go 5 times in the first week, I already said this in the intro, if you go 5 times in the first week, but then you don't go again for another 6 months, that's not going to do anything, right? This is why I encourage people to say, okay, well, just do 1 workout a week. And when you start feeling comfortable with that, when you've done that for like 6 weeks, we can add a second workout a week. Then we can do like that for 6 weeks. Then if you feel good with that, you can add another one, right? You can always add more afterwards, but you're doing once a week consistently for a year, right? That's 52 training sessions. You can make so much progress with that, especially if you follow everything that I've told you so far and progressive overload, which is the next point. Whereas if you go, again, like 4 or 5 times a week for the first month, but then you stop and then you have 11 months where you don't go, you're not going to get results, right? So it's much better to do less consistently than it is to do loads like inconsistently. And most people have this backwards. They're like, oh, if I can't go 4 or 5 times a week, there's no point. I'm not going to bother. There is absolutely a point, right? Even like going to the gym once a week, going for a run once a week, it is so much better for your health than not doing anything at all. It is not nothing, right? It's not like there's a minimum threshold that you have to do each week, say like 3 hours of training a week. Anything below that is nothing. And when you reach the threshold, all of a sudden it does something. It doesn't work like that. If you do nothing and then you start doing 5 minutes a week, that is exactly 5 minutes more than nothing. That is going to give you health benefits that doing nothing wouldn't give you. So this is where you have to be like realistic. What can you realistically do? Look at the next year of your life. Can you realistically go to the gym once a week, twice a week? Like do that instead of trying to do something every day and then burning out and being like, oh, I'm not going to do anything. The flip side of that though, is if you have a week off, don't freak out, right? If everyone in your house is sick, you got sick kids, you're sick yourself, and you don't work out for a week. If you don't work out for 2 weeks, it doesn't matter. Let's say you go on holiday and you don't work out for 2-3 weeks, right? It doesn't matter. Just carry on afterwards. If you see it that way, right? 52 weeks in the year, let's say you take 10 weeks off, you're still going to do 42 workouts if you work out once a week on those other weeks. You're still going to make loads of progress there. Also, you don't really start to lose strength or fitness or muscle mass until you haven't trained for 2 weeks. So if you have a 2-week break, after that, you'll start to lose muscle mass and fitness. Strength is hard won, but it's also hard lost. It's hard to lose it. So it doesn't just disappear overnight just because you missed a session. It doesn't just disappear because you didn't go for a week or two. It starts to disappear after that 2-week mark, and then you lose it gradually in the same way that you built it gradually. Again, too many people are all or nothing over this. So if you've had a week or two break, don't freak out. Don't just be like, oh, fuck it, there's no point. Get out of that all or nothing thinking. Get back into going to the gym, and you'll get back to where you were, and you'll continue to improve. It's about what you do most of the time. So if you have a few weeks off a year, it doesn't matter. And another thing I say to my clients is don't think of it as skipping a workout. Think of it as pushing the workout back. So let's say you got 2 workouts a week, and then you have a week where you, let's say 5 days where you can't get to the gym. Think of it as just pushing back your workout for 5 days. You're not just going to skip workout 1 and go straight to workout 2. You're just going to do workout 1 later than what you plan doing. It's just a 5-day gap instead of a 2-day gap. It's not a big deal. Just keep on going and just see the gaps as being bigger in between the workouts if you need to because of other life circumstances. Finally, the last thing that we're going to talk about is also the most important part, which is so annoying that it comes at the end because this is such an important thing to remember with strength training, but it's also what most people just don't do. And that is progressive overload. At the same time, unless you do all those other things first, unless you're doing full body, you're going consistently, you're doing full range of motion, you're doing mobility, you're doing the correct technique, you're doing the right weight, all of that stuff, if progressive overload isn't going to work either. It's kind of like saying, what's the most important part of a bike? Is it the saddle? Is it the wheels? Is it the handlebars? Is it the frame? All of them are important, right? None of them are just on their own. Your handlebars don't do anything, right? So all of these things are really, really, really important. Progressive overload comes at the end once you've nailed all of those basics. And what it means is that you need to progress in those exercises. So again, going back to what most women do is they go to the gym, they pick up 4-kilo weights and they do their chest press, and then they do their bicep curls, and then they do their lateral raises, and then they do a squat, all with the same weight. Then they come the next week and they go, oh, I'm feeling really strong, I'm going to try 5 kilos. Then the next week they come back and they go, oh no, I'm feeling really weak now, I'm going to go back to 4 kilos or do it with no weight. And then they just stay on those 4 kilos forever. When I used to work in a gym, when I first started working in a gym 10 years ago, I used to see women doing that. I go, oh, I've been training for a year and I haven't seen any difference in my body. What are you doing? She's like, 4-kilo weights for everything, and she hasn't moved on at all. You will not get results if you just go to the gym for a year and you just do 4 kilos, 4 kilos, 4 kilos, 4 kilos. You won't get any results, right? It's definitely better than nothing, and it's definitely going to improve or keep your fitness to a certain level, but you're not going to get results. When I say results, I mean you're not going to get more muscle, you're not going to get more bone density, you're not going to get more fitness, you're not going to get more cardiovascular fitness, you're not going to get stronger, you're not going to feel more like your body's stronger against injury prevention. You're not going to get improvements in all of the physiological level of what improves in our body. You have to progress. And the first way to progress is range of motion, right? So if you can only do half squats, getting those to full range of motion squats over time is the first way to improve. But then you need to start adding weight to it. And it doesn't need to be shoving a big heavy barbell on your back. It might be just grabbing a 1-kilo dumbbell, doing 1-kilo squats for 10 reps. Then the following week doing 2 kilos. Then the following week doing 3 kilos, then 4, then 5, then 6. And you get the idea, right? After 10 weeks, you're doing 10 kilos. this seems like, oh God, 10 kilos still feels so heavy. Of course it does. But you're not going to do it from one session to the next. You're going to build it gradually over 10 weeks. And what happens is you come and you do your squats with whatever weight, you recover from that workout, and then you're stronger the next week and you're able to do a heavier weight. Okay. So, but I find that this 1 kilo at a time is, for 70, 80% of women, is the most kind of like the least intimidating way of going about it. And they usually don't, it's usually far slower than they can actually do, but it doesn't scare them. It feels doable. They don't get injured, and all of that kind of stuff. So, bearing in mind that if I was working with you one-on-one and we're meeting in the gym once a week, twice a week, I would probably push you a bit further and a bit faster than that. But for most women, building their confidence in the movement, doing it correctly, adding 1 kilo at a time is a pretty good way of going about it. And I've had lots of women do that and then move on to the 20 kilo barbell after they've built up their dumbbell squats, okay, that have gone on to doing a barbell bench press after they've built up their strength with dumbbells first. And it genuinely doesn't matter where you start, 0 weight, 1 kilos, you can get so strong if you're consistent and if you apply progressive overload from week to week. The one other way of there are a few different ways of progressive overload. That you can obviously add time under tension, you can slow the movement down, you can add a pause. There are lots of ways of creating progressive overload, but for the most part, most people don't need to apply them ever. It's a much more advanced thing. You just want to add weight over time. But the other important type of a progressive overload is also, so I often give incline push-ups, right? Most women can't do push-ups on the floor. So they need to start on a big incline and then they need to move to lower and lower surfaces. And that increases the resistance of the movement over time rather than adding weight, because obviously it's a body weight exercise. Another example is like if you're trying to get your first pull up, you might start with eccentric pull ups, so lowering yourself down from the bar. You might start with partial range of motion pull ups, so you're just working through a very small range of motion, then increase the range of motion over time. So increasing range of motion or moving onto lower surfaces, increasing the resistance, that's what's important, right? But for most exercises, it's going to be simply adding weight to the exercises. You're going to need to add weight to the big compound important stuff like the squats, the deadlifts, the presses, the pulls. They're the things that you're going to add weight to. Whereas all the accessory stuff at the end, like the bicep curls and the whatever, you'll always be doing heavier and heavy weights with that. You're going to get stuck and plateau at a certain point. So most women can't do more than a 12 kilo row, for example, because the muscle group just isn't, the muscles aren't big enough and the joints aren't big enough to load it more. So you kind of get to 12 kilos and then you stop. Like bicep curls, most women will start with 4 kilos and then they'll be able to do 5, then 6, and some will move on to 7, but you can't really keep progressing beyond that because it's limited by the size of the muscle group. But the big compound stuff should be looking to add weight over time. You obviously then will plateau, when you get to 30, 40, 50 kilos, and then you'll need to progress in other ways. But for the majority of beginners, you just need to add weight until you get to that point where you plateau, and then you have to do something else. But I don't want to go into those things because this is already more than long enough. So, okay, this is like a comprehensive guide of how to actually get results in the gym. I hope that you've gotten some things out of this that are like, oh, I'm not doing that, I'm not doing that. Some details that you can add to your training and think about. Again, I have a really awesome email course that has programs written for you based on all of these principles. And then you get an email a day going through each one of these principles. Once you learn this stuff and you understand this stuff, this is what trainers are supposed to know. Not all of them know. This is what we study to learn. You can learn this stuff as well. It's not rocket science, and then you can apply it to yourself rather than using a trainer. But if you start with my email course, that will teach you so much. If you read each of the emails, listen to the podcasts or the videos, and apply these principles to the training program. And if you need more help than that and you want somebody to write your training program and tell you exactly what to do, correct your technique, tell you if your form is right, all of that kind of stuff, then check out my online coaching program. I have an intensive one-on-one online coaching program that I work with beginners, I work with intermediate trainees on strength training and fat loss, and I get amazing results. So either fill out the application form or book a call with me, or just shoot me a message and we'll get started and see if it's a good fit for you. Okay, cool. Hope you enjoyed that. Let me know if you have any recommendations for future podcasts.